November 29th, 1970, a Sunday. Two hikers moving through the Isdalen Valley, a remote ravine carved between the mountains just outside Bergen, Norway, stopped when they saw something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. A woman, lying on the ground, face up amid the rocks and pine needles. She wasn't sleeping, she wasn't lost, she was burning. Her body was still smoldering when they found her. The flames had done their work with deliberate, thorough cruelty, not just burning flesh, but destroying evidence. Removing identity, erasing a human being, no name, no passport, no fingerprints, no face left to recognize. She was gone before anyone even knew she existed. And for more than 50 years, she has had no name. The Isdalen Valley, known locally as Isdalen, meaning the Ice Valley, sits just a few kilometers from the center of Bergen, Norway's second-largest city. It's a striking place, beautiful in the way that only Nordic wilderness can be. Steep, green, silent, and utterly indifferent to human presence. Locals use it for hiking. Families walk its trails on weekends. It is, by every outward measure, an ordinary place. But Norwegians have another name for it: the Valley of Death. That name predates 1970. For generations, the valley had been a place where the desperate came to end their lives, a grim tradition embedded in local folklore. Perhaps that's why, when the hikers called the police that Sunday afternoon, the initial response was not panic. It had happened before, but this time was different. When Bergen police arrived at the scene, they found the woman lying on her back on a sleeping bag. Her arms were positioned unnaturally, spread out from her body at angles, as though she had been arranged. Around her, scattered deliberately, were personal effects. 2 plastic bottles that had contained liquor, several pills, an umbrella, a small Primus stove, rubber boots. Her clothing was partially burned, her face was unrecognizable. The medical examiner who arrived on scene noted something immediately wrong. The burns on the body were severe, but they were not consistent with what you'd expect if someone had simply set themselves on fire in a moment of desperation. These burns were methodical. The fingers had been burned beyond recognition. Not incidentally, specifically. The labels had been removed from every single item of clothing found on her body, and in her stomach, recovered during autopsy, were approximately 50 sleeping pills, along with a quantity of alcohol. Cause of death was initially listed as possible suicide. But even that first night, the investigators were not convinced. The autopsy findings opened more questions than they answered. The woman had consumed a lethal dose of sleeping pills, specifically a combination of phenobarbital and other sedatives. She had also consumed a significant amount of alcohol, almost certainly enough to render her unconscious. But here is the detail that changed everything. She had also been strangled. The forensic pathologist found marks on her neck consistent with manual strangulation, applied either before or around the same time as the drug overdose. Someone had wanted to make absolutely certain this woman would not survive, and then they had set her on fire, burned her fingertips, removed every label from her clothing, and walked away through the valley. This was not a suicide, this was a murder, staged to look like one. Bergen police officially upgraded the case to homicide, and the investigation into one of Europe's most baffling mysteries began. Before police could ask who killed her, they had to answer a more fundamental question. Who was she? The body offered what little it could. She was female, estimated age between 25 and 40 years old. She was approximately 160 to 167 centimeters tall, about 5 feet 4. Her hair was dark, her build was average. She had dental work, fillings and other work that a forensic odontologist noted appeared European in origin, but could not be pinpointed to a specific country. She had no identifying documents on her. Her fingerprints were burned away. Her face was too badly damaged for any kind of visual identification. The clothing labels, every single one, had been deliberately removed before she died, or removed by whoever murdered her. Investigators began looking outward. They contacted Interpol. They released descriptions to neighboring countries. They asked, has anyone reported a woman of this description missing? The silence was almost total. Then, a break. 2 suitcases had been checked into a locker at the Bergen railway station. A routine check, triggered by the investigation, revealed they were still unclaimed. Inside those suitcases, investigators found women's clothing, wigs, multiple wigs in different colors, and a collection of items suggesting travel across multiple European countries. The labels on the clothing inside the suitcases had also been removed. Every single one. But crucially, the suitcases also contained something else. Encoded handwritten notes, a cipher, a personal shorthand that the woman had used, presumably, to record her movements, her contacts, or information she did not want anyone else to read. Code breakers worked on these notes for weeks. What they eventually deciphered were abbreviated entries that appeared to document a travel itinerary, cities, dates, and what seemed to be coded references to contacts or locations. The cities that emerged were scattered across Western Europe: Paris, Geneva, Oslo, Brussels, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Frankfurt, Zurich. This woman had not been hiding in one place. She had been moving, deliberately, constantly, across international borders, under what appeared to be multiple identities. The investigation expanded to the hotels of Bergen. Police contacted every hotel and boarding house in the city with a description of the woman. After methodical searching, they identified that she had stayed at 2 different hotels in Bergen in the weeks before her death: the Hotel Neptune and the Horderheimen. She had checked in under false names. At one hotel, she had registered as Fenella Lorch, at another as Claudia Nielsen. Neither name appeared in any passport register. Neither name could be traced to a real person. Hotel staff who had interacted with her were interviewed. The descriptions they offered painted a picture of a woman who was simultaneously conspicuous and deliberately unremarkable. She spoke multiple languages. Witnesses recalled her speaking Norwegian, German, English, and what may have been French or Flemish. She moved through Bergen with confidence, as though she knew where she was going, even though staff saw no evidence she had ever been to the city before. She ate alone. She kept largely to herself. She received no visitors that staff were aware of, but she was, by multiple accounts, beautiful. Dark-haired, well-dressed, with a composed, watchful quality that made her memorable, though it was only in hindsight that anyone thought to remember her. One staff member at one of the hotels reported something else. In the days before her death, the woman had seemed frightened. Not paranoid, not erratic, just quietly, carefully afraid, as though she was waiting for something or someone, and was not sure she was prepared for either. What emerged from the investigation was not the portrait of an ordinary woman. It was the portrait of a ghost. Norwegian police, working with Interpol, began tracing the woman's movements backward through Europe using the coded notes from her suitcase, statements from hotel staff across multiple countries, and passenger manifests from trains and flights. What they found was extraordinary. In the months before her death, this woman had traveled through at least 8 European countries. She had used at minimum 8 different identities, different names, different passports, different stories. She had stayed at hotels across the continent, always paying in cash, always registering under names that could not be verified. Always alone, she carried wigs, multiple wigs, suggesting deliberate changes of appearance. She was fluent in multiple European languages, switching between them with apparent ease. She moved along routes that, when mapped, seemed purposeful rather than random. She had no apparent job, no known employer, no family who had reported her missing to any law enforcement agency in any country. Yet she traveled extensively, stayed in reputable hotels, and apparently had access to sufficient funds to sustain a life of constant, deliberate movement. The question that began circulating, quietly at first, then with increasing urgency, was the question that has never been answered. Was she a spy? In 1970, Europe was not at peace. Not really. The Cold War was at its complicated, paranoid, shadowy height. The intelligence agencies of East and West, the CIA, the KGB, MI6, the BND, the Stasi and its Western counterparts, maintained vast networks of operatives, informants, and couriers moving through European cities. Bergen, Norway, was not a backwater in this world. Norway shared a border with the Soviet Union in the far north. It was a NATO member. Its fjords and harbors were of significant strategic interest. Bergen had long been considered a point of intelligence interest. The profile of the Isdal Woman, the multiple identities, the coded notes, the constant movement across Western Europe, the apparent access to funds without visible means of income, the languages, the wigs, the deliberate erasure of every identifying mark, fit the profile of an intelligence operative or courier almost perfectly. Norwegian police raised the possibility with their own government. The response was less than forthcoming. A Norwegian journalist investigating the case decades later found evidence suggesting that the Norwegian Security Service, the PST's predecessor, may have been aware of the woman's presence in Norway before her death. Some investigators believe a file relating to the case was closed prematurely and that certain evidence was never fully pursued. Whether that represents a cover-up, institutional incompetence, Cold War political sensitivity, or simply the limitations of a 1970 investigation, no one has been able to definitively say. But the shadow of intelligence involvement has never fully left this case. Over the more than 50 years since her body was found in the Isdalen Valley, investigators, both official and amateur, have proposed a range of theories about who the Isdal woman was and who killed her. The most persistent and widely discussed theories fall into several categories. First, the spy theory. This is the theory that has received the most serious attention and the most media coverage. It holds that the Isdal woman was an operative, possibly a courier or a field agent, working for one of the major Cold War intelligence agencies. Under this theory, she was killed by her own agency, or by a rival one, because she had been compromised, had outlived her usefulness, or was about to defect. The staging of her death as a suicide, the deliberate destruction of her identity, and the thoroughness with which every traceable detail was eliminated all speak to professional intelligence tradecraft rather than an improvised murder. Second, she was fleeing someone. A variation on the spy theory, or an alternative to it, holds that the Isdal woman was not an operative, but a civilian who had become entangled in something dangerous. Perhaps a smuggling network. Perhaps a criminal organization with international reach. Perhaps she was a witness, a courier for something other than intelligence, or someone who had made a powerful enemy while crossing borders. Under this theory, she came to Bergen not on a mission, but on the run. And whoever she was running from found her. Third, she was German. Based on analysis of her dental work, her apparent language fluency, and fragments recovered from the coded notes, several investigators have suggested she was almost certainly German, or at least had lived in Germany for a significant period. An NRK documentary investigation produced in 2016 explored this angle extensively, noting that the pattern of her travel through Germany was particularly pronounced. DNA analysis conducted in the early 2000s produced a mitochondrial DNA profile. The profile pointed to a Central European genetic background consistent with a German, Swiss, or Austrian origin. Norwegian authorities have periodically pursued this lead, particularly with German law enforcement, but no match has ever been made. Fourth, the merchant or smuggler theory. Less dramatic than the spy narrative, this theory holds that the Isdal woman was involved in some form of black market or smuggling operation, possibly related to pharmaceuticals, currency, or luxury goods, all of which were tightly controlled across European borders in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Her constant movement, multiple identities, and access to cash without visible income could fit this profile as well. But the ruthlessness of her murder, strangulation, sedation, burning, deliberate removal of all identifying features, argues for something with higher stakes than minor black market commerce. One name that surfaced during the investigation and has never been satisfactorily resolved belongs to a man Norwegian police were never able to fully locate or question. Several hotel staff members recalled seeing the Isdal woman in conversation with a foreign man, described as dark-haired, middle-aged, and speaking what some believed to be German, in the days before her death. This man could not be identified. He was never traced. Whether he was her killer, her handler, her contact, or simply a coincidental acquaintance, no one knows. He remains, like her, a shadow. For decades, the Isdal woman case sat in the archives of the Bergen Police Department, officially open, practically dormant. It was not forgotten, Norwegians remembered, and the story circulated in true crime communities long before the internet made cold cases a global obsession. But there was no active investigation, no new leads, no viable path forward. Then, in 2016, everything changed. The Norwegian public broadcaster NRK produced a major investigative documentary series on the case, a production that combined modern forensic science with archival investigation and brought the story to a new global audience. The NRK investigation produced several significant developments. Working with forensic scientists at the University of Bern, the team conducted a new analysis of the woman's teeth. Rather than simply looking at her dental work, they used isotope analysis, a technique that examines the chemical composition of tooth enamel, which absorbs distinctive mineral signatures from the environment in which a person grew up. The isotope signature, once analyzed, can point, with meaningful confidence, toward a geographic region. The results indicated that the Isdal woman had spent her childhood and early adolescence in an area consistent with Central Europe, most likely Germany or possibly German-speaking Switzerland. The team also obtained and submitted a new DNA profile for international comparison. And they did something else. They gave her a face. Working with forensic facial reconstruction specialists, the NRK team commissioned a reconstruction of what the Isdal woman may have looked like in life. The result, a digital reconstruction based on skull measurements and forensic modeling, showed a dark-haired woman with sharp cheekbones, a composed expression, and eyes that seemed somehow to be watching. The image was published internationally. It was shared millions of times, tip lines filled. For the first time in 46 years, people across Europe looked at the face of the Isdal woman and asked, "Do I know her?" The answers, unfortunately, remained elusive. Dozens of individuals suggested possible identities. Families who had lost track of relatives in the late 1960s and early 1970s came forward. Researchers in Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, and the UK submitted leads. None resulted in a confirmed identification, but the case had been reborn, and investigators were not ready to stop. In subsequent years, the Norwegian authorities and their international partners pursued new forensic avenues. A genealogical DNA approach, similar to the technique that identified the Golden State Killer in the United States, was announced as a potential path forward. Unlike traditional DNA matching, which requires a database entry from the unknown individual themselves, genealogical DNA analysis can identify relatives and trace family trees, working backward to a possible identification. As of the most recent public updates from Norwegian authorities, this analysis was ongoing. Investigators have also continued pursuing the German connection. Norwegian police have worked with German federal authorities, the BKA, to cross-reference missing persons reports from the late 1960s and early 1970s. The search has been complicated by the fact that, in that era, records were not digitized, databases were fragmented, and a woman with multiple false identities may have been deliberately excluded from any paper trail. The investigation has not produced a name, but it has not been abandoned. In the Isdalen Valley, there is a stone. It was placed there in the years after her death, not by her family, because no family has come forward, not by friends, because no one has claimed to have known her. It was placed there by a community that refused to let her simply disappear. The stone bears an inscription in Norwegian. It marks the place where she was found. She is buried in Bergen. A Catholic priest performed rites at her funeral. She was, based on a small cross found among her belongings, believed to have been Catholic. The priest did not know her name. She was buried as an unknown woman. That inscription has not changed. Pause. In 55 years, the Isdal woman has become something unusual in the world of cold cases. She is not merely a mystery. She is, in some sense, a symbol of the vulnerability of human identity, of the ease with which a person can be erased, and of the stubborn refusal of communities and investigators to accept that erasure as final. She was somebody's daughter, possibly somebody's sister, possibly someone's friend, colleague, or lover. Someone, somewhere, may know exactly who she was, may have always known, may have chosen for whatever reason, fear, complicity, or something stranger still, to stay silent. Or perhaps she was so thoroughly remade by whatever life she was living, whatever mission she was running, whatever she was running from, that even the people who had once known her would not recognize the woman she became. What we know, stripped of speculation, is this. A woman died violently in a Norwegian valley on or around November 29, 1970. She was between her mid-20s and early 40s. She was likely Central European, possibly German. She spoke multiple languages. She had been living under false identities and in constant movement for some time before her death. She was killed deliberately by someone who had access to sedatives and the presence of mind to stage a scene and burn away evidence of her identity. She has not been identified. Her killer or killers have never been found. Her case remains officially open. Somewhere, there may be a family wondering what happened to someone they lost in 1970. Somewhere, there may be a person who knew her, who worked with her, traveled beside her, or feared her, who has carried this secret for more than half a century. Somewhere, in a database or an archive or a family tree, there may be a thread that, once pulled, finally gives her back the one thing that was taken from her more thoroughly than anything else: her name. Until that day, she is the Isdal Woman, and she is still waiting to be found.